Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Just Crunch It. With us today, we have Michelle Killebrew, a marketing guru. Michelle is the former senior vice president and CMO of Americas at NTT Limited. With a rich career dating back all the way to 1995 and spanning multiple companies, advisory roles, leadership roles, the one common thread you will see all across Michelle's work, her profile, her history is a passion for marketing, a very, very, very deeply rooted passion. A testimony to which is her numerous awards and felicitations. Today, in this episode, we dive deeper into what marketing in the next few years is going to look like and what role does data play into it. So let's get started. Hey, Michelle, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure for me as well. And people would not know this, but we went through quite a bit of like shuffle back and forth before recording it. So I'm finally, like we're doing it, and I'm super glad we're able to do this. Michelle, I want to jump straight into the meat, and I'll get into your background and your story and how everything has happened. But we have a lot of people who are very curious about data. We have a lot of people who often come back with questions about AI in our audience. And of course, you are here all about marketing. So I want to marry everything together. And my first question, which is a personal curiosity to me, because when I think about marketing my product, I often find myself going back and forth between a lot of stuff, is what is most important for you as a marketer? Is it like the story? Is it the tool you're using? Is it the brand presence? Or is there no comparison as such out there? Like how do you think about marketing when I go in and say, hey, Crunch is my company, we're thinking about marketing, like what's the most important thing for you?
Gosh, it's all of those things. And quite honestly, I think that's part of the challenge with marketing is it covers such a deep span of information. So if you think about sort of the startup ecosystem, you've got a problem and you've got that problem market fit. And then you need to figure out product market fit and what your total addressable market is and your serviceable addressable market. And then figure out, how do you position yourself effectively against the competitive set or the alternative of potentially doing nothing to your prospects and buyers. And then articulate that into very thoughtful messaging that's going to resonate with those various buyers, breaking that into multiple personas and cohorts. And of course, if you're going after enterprise and you get into whole buying centers, et cetera. And then, how are you conveying your message creatively, the colors, the look and feel, all of the campaign execution, your communication strategy, your PR strategy, your alliances strategy. It's all of those things. And so, the story and the narrative has to be based on the market that you're trying to reach and the problem that you're trying to solve. And so I think it's because marketing, go-to-market in general is so complex that people try and define it simply, but by doing that, they only end up looking at one facet of what marketing is and needs to be in order to be successful to help drive and shape a business and potentially even a market.
Yeah. So I hear you. And in parallel, I'm thinking about everything that is happening in the world right now, right? Like there's AI, everything is changing. Like enterprises are more scared. I think I was reading this report just yesterday where it's about the perception of buyers. And there's like this column saying that today, out of all the years ever in the past, the brand and the presence you have is the most important thing that's actually leading to closing deals. Everything else, whether you are just better as a piece of technology, is not going to matter as much because people are in general scared, overwhelmed, and the risk appetite has gone further low. Markets are probably going to behave this way. But in parallel, there's a massive shift happening. I think OpenAI just announced that they have 280 million or so of revenue a month. I hope I'm not wrong on record, but I just read it somewhere. And like that only points to the fact that that's just like the start. There's a lot that's going to change. Maybe marketing as we have known it. I just came out of a roundtable on a group called GTM Circle. And this group usually always talks about everything in terms of how go-to-market is working. There are like a lot of closed leaders a lot of big leaders in a closed room. And today's topic was outsourcing your BDR. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? How does that work? And of course, like there were a bunch of pointers, but there was like a big discussion around what's about AI, right? Like what are we supposed to do with it? How's everyone feeling about AI-based SDRs and whatnot? And somewhere, as you were talking about everything that marketing depends on, in my head, I'm getting this question that marketing has evolved a lot. Like internet came, stuff happened, AI came, mobile came. There's like very interesting, very creative things that marketing folks have done around the world. When you look back on everything that has happened in the last 2 decades, a large part of which has been also professional for you, and when you look back on where we are today, where everything is changing, what is the future going to look like? Like, do you have any opinions on how we're going to shape up? Or if a founder or a data person here were thinking about, hey, I'm going to build a company and probably it's in 2030 that everyone in the world is going to know me. what should be the steps they are taking today to ensure that they're not necessarily, like irrelevant in 2030, or that they're not playing catch up, but they were like the early adopters of the right steps needed to position a brand like as the dominant brand in 2030?
So I'll start and kind of work backwards. I think the one thing not to be obsolete, say in 2030, is just agility. You can imagine, today in 2024, by the time we get, I mean, things are changing so rapidly. By the time we get to 2030, it's just being able to pivot, to be able to try and read the tea leaves as effectively as possible, not only within your own organization, but within the market at large. And I think that becomes really difficult because you're looking at aggregate macro, headwinds and tailwinds. You're looking at what's happening in your market, what's happening in your competitive stack. You're going to see new competitors rise and fall very quickly in different spaces. Big companies are going to get disrupted, and companies will merge, and so just being very, very agile, and that is going to have companies are going to have to be prepared to do that much more frequently than they have in the past. So that's something that I'll just say in terms of success. And going back a little bit to your brand comment, I think brand is important, especially in a risk-averse world. So I worked for IBM, and the old saying for IBM was nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. And so, as at that point in time, an IT leader back in the day, if you were going to do a technology implementation for your personal career risk, or the risk of your organization, there was a brand promise that came with purchasing IBM technology to help you do that. And that's where I think brand is very important. What gets kind of confusing, and we're seeing a little bit of a pendulum swing in the marketing industry right now, going from, what was out of the pandemic, full court press on performance marketing. We need revenue yesterday, and how do we get more campaigns? And we're going to look at our analytics and optimize that spend as much as possible. We're seeing in the industry some impact to that in terms of tailwinds, both on marketing performance. It's getting more expensive, more friction in the marketplace, both on the marketing side and in the sales process. So moving that pipeline through to one, close one revenue is significantly challenging as well. And we have, I'll say sort of as a macro trend, most organizations coming out of the pandemic focused on the performance and didn't actually go back and look at their ideal client profile or ideal customer profile and the value that they needed to provide to those buyers. Has your buyer cohort changed? Have their needs changed? And the answer is yes, including, executive buying committees, the chief procurement officer, the chief finance officer getting far more involved in it than they would have previously. And the marketing from the brand and positioning side in large hadn't gone back to reevaluate, is our previous ICP, is our previous positioning and go-to-market, are we looking at the right adjacent markets? Is that still valid? And so we're hearing a lot about sort of this focus on brand. I think it's a both. We do have to go back to some of that core strategy, but I hope we don't see an undue swing just in terms of the same pivot that happened 15 years ago from brand and positioning into performance.
Yeah, but what role would you say is data playing into all of it, or AI playing into it? Because I get the broader picture, the larger umbrella, but is there specific things people can look at when it comes to data, when it comes to the patterns evolving in AI, that could affect it?
I think it's still somewhat early because organizations are trying to figure out how to layer in AI into their insights patterns, as well as how they actually layer AI into their product and delivery, their offerings to the market. And so with both of those, there's a lot of trial and testing. There's certainly some, leading marketing teams that are leaning into what AI can deliver in terms of looking at gaining some of that market research, that market insight much more rapidly, and then perhaps looking at more subsegments to see what those patterns may look like. So there is certainly an opportunity to leverage AI on some of that. What are the patterns telling us? How are the segments changing over time? And I would hope, as we get sort of more sophisticated at looking at the ICP, yes, we need to do a fair bit of research, but then looking at the AI, A/B testing with AI to actually do some more testing in terms of where do we think that future market demand might come from.
Yeah. So as you're talking about it, again, I'm thinking in parallel, and I can't stop but imagine a marketer of future working in a very different way as opposed to the marketer today. And you're mentioning some of very interesting points, which is how is the segment or the cohort doing? Could we do an open world analysis and get more discovery about this particular person or this group of people we're talking about? Could we learn about what's happening in the world and change with it our strategy in real time? But as marketing has evolved, and ignore everything about AI data and all the changes that are happening today, broadly, when you look back at everything that is available to as a tech stack to a marketer, all the way from someone who is a marketing analyst to a junior level marketer to a CMO, to maybe even those CEOs who care a lot about marketing internally, what would you say is largely still a pain point? Like, is it just the attribution? Because I hear that coming up in conversations a lot, that we're not able to attribute what's actually leading to growth, what marketing aspect is driving how much of revenue. Because sometimes like these are measured in very abstract terms. It's maybe about the user, hey, how many people know us, how many people have discovered us, and that not necessarily is always linked to revenue. But want to hear your thoughts here. Like, what would you say are still some largely unmet problems? And the reason I'm asking this is because today, with the advent of AI, there's a possibility to tackle a lot of these unmet problems. So someone who's a builder thinking in our audience, what are the problems would you say they should be working on? Because when you look at a tool like HubSpot, you will be able to find something or the other that they're doing about the idea that you have in your head. Like they have touched on it a little bit. And it's very easy for a founder or a builder to get overwhelmed about, oh my God, what do I even go in and sort for when it comes to marketing? Because there are these tools that are doing everything. So yeah.
So I was at a go-to-market meetup myself just a Friday ago, and it was interesting. I was reminded. So Scott Brinker puts out the MarTech, the state of the MarTech universe every year, and it's 24,000 MarTech products today. And so when I think sort of from the founder landscape, part of the problem when you think about the full tech stack from a marketing, especially from a marketing leadership perspective, and there's so much cost pressures now to consolidate your MarTech spend, is that a lot of those products have been stood up around what ought to be features, and you're only using sort of a fraction of, what is an entire offering. Even if it's a large offering, kind of thing. It could be like a CRM and you're only really using a small portion, or you have to customize it. You're not really using the breadth of the solution. So I think complexity, first and foremost, is really challenging. I find, and I've been having some of these conversations with my professional peers as well, attribution is a really interesting one, because it's now kind of, I hear it all the time, and obviously there are cost pressures and the pressure to demonstrate ROI in the market. So it kind of makes sense. But for the last 15 years, we've been talking about attribution, and now it seems to be reaching a crescendo right at the time that we're starting to realize that the methodology and the modeling is incorrect. It doesn't help you actually really make investment decisions. It helps you understand, it helps you validate what you thought was possible, because when you're putting your own human weighted attribution onto the model, and you change the weight of those different attribution models, and where you invest or what you cut becomes completely 180-degree different from one model to the next, you can't really put weight in that as a methodology. I happen to be an advisor for a company called Proof Analytics. I think it's part of the future, quite honestly. It's causal analytics. They've got an amazing way to do regression analysis on performance in a way that sort of piece parts out the time lag of each of the components. So if you've got a social media campaign, if you've got an email campaign, if you've got like a search, you're turning on search, you've got a product launch, you've got those as line items, and then you've got revenue, and you can actually kind of backwards map how long. So the email campaign took X number of weeks or months, this took this long to actually impact revenue, and allows you to forecast and model out potential future outcomes and update that over time so that you've got a consistent projection. And that's something that marketing hasn't really been able to do. I can tell you this, having sat in a number of QBRs and presentations, when sales is looking at they're presenting the forecast to the CEO and the rest of the ELT, and marketing isn't able to effectively forecast this investment is going to yield future predictable, or at least within a margin, revenue. So I think that that's where the opportunity is.
Got it. So this company that you're talking about, or let's say anyone who's thinking about a solution today, they're faced with like a couple of challenges. And I want to ask you this question because somewhere I think I personally also struggle with this. You as a marketer have experience now. For a founder who is working on a new product, they're up against incumbents. And these incumbents today, because of everything that AI is doing, it's very easy for them to go in and say, oh, we are also going to add this feature. And as a smaller company, you are always up against things like, hey, I don't know if you folks are going to be secure enough. I don't know if we want to bet on you yet. Like, why would I not just go on and bet on Microsoft or Google and these names that you keep hearing of? Like in the data domain, it would be someone like Snowflake. You're up against incumbents. These incumbents have very deep relationships. And then they also have like extremely large pockets. So the small company, which doesn't have as much budget, what would you say? And let's say they have identified a problem, because the thing that you just mentioned about being able to forecast and like doing the causal analysis, it's very interesting. It's very important. But then how do you make yourself stand out as a smaller company and fight against all the forces that are against you so that you make a mark? And let's establish that making a mark here is like getting to a substantial revenue, anywhere like 20 million or so of ARR, because there are tons of companies that are making like short-term 5 million, 10 million of revenue. And then I know for a fact that they're not going to succeed in the long run, because what they're doing is never like gonna be sustainable, or let's say it's like prone to threat and someone is just gonna like eat them up. What do you say to that?
So I think, I mean, generally, and this is what becomes really interesting for a founder to think through what they need at each stage of growth when they hit those different inflection and milestones. You have to map your go-to-market strategy to those various inflection points. And I think one of the ways that you can get over sort of the concern about, is this small organization going to stay with me for the future, and especially for enterprises, are they willing to have, put that trust in that feature in order to bring it on board and build dependency around it in their organization? This is where I think, when you're kind of at that inflection point, you need to think through your ecosystem strategy. So how can you gain trust and validation through ecosystem partners? And maybe you're partnering with, a company like Snowflake. And so if you've got sort of that validation, both in terms of, I'll say, brand validation, right? You're associated with a brand that your potential clients trust, potential introductions to their existing clients, and undoubtedly they've given some level of vetting to your solution to help before they would kind of put forward their recommendation. So this is where you have to think through your different go-to-market levers and think through, okay, we've gotten to this scale of growth in terms of direct customers. They're usually going to be smaller market, initial clients. And if you want to go up market, you need to start to engage with some of the ecosystem and think through your alliance strategy.
Yeah, but it's almost like a chicken and egg problem, right? Like partnerships come when you have something to give back. You can't like just go to a partner and say, hey, let's work together, because you need to like have a symbiotic relationship. And
Sure.
you could be very intelligent about it. So let's say there's an up and coming product which is hungry. It's not like the giant who doesn't care about you. It's someone who is actually playing against, let's say, an established player, and they're hungry to grow. And you know that the next step after they have been deployed is going to be you, because it makes common sense to deploy, let's say, a marketing AI layer on top of a particular marketing related CDP platform or something like that, which is a customer data or something like that. So you could like identify these people, but those opportunities are very few where someone is hungry enough and you go in and tell them that, hey, I'm going to promote your tool. Because in that case, it's beneficial for you to promote a marketing tool or a CDP tool as well, because you know that once that CDP is deployed, the next step is going to be your deployment. And then you can identify those partnerships, but it's still very, very, very tough to do. But in general, I want to double down on one point you mentioned, which is these are probably going to be like a little bit of smaller companies. So for anyone who's, let's say, building today, is like mid-market the right space to target? And does that mean that in 2 years, mid-market is going to be extremely competitive as a sector? Not that it hasn't been, it's already super competitive, but would you say that in the next 2 years, it's probably going to get worse?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's in general that is true, because I think enterprises are going to have to figure out how to be more nimble, right? And so the mid-market's probably going to have more agility than the enterprises. And of course, small organizations will be able to potentially be, things like cloud first, AI first, just in their completely modern go-to-market and how they're building and architecting their solutions. So there is a hierarchy of agility. And I do think that the mid-market space is going to be, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a sweet spot as they try and figure out how do they position to win in the marketplace overall.
Michelle, so you keep talking about buyer enablement a lot. Like, what is buyer enablement? Could you give us a rundown? And then, like, how do you enable a buyer? Let's say, because in this case, we've been talking about a marketing AI product that eases the life of folks in marketing. So I'm talking about enabling a buyer who themselves, they are a marketer. So what is buyer enablement? Like, how do you enable a buyer who's a marketer?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, it comes down to education. So education about the category, education about, maybe it's the vertical, but certainly about the solution that you are offering and how you can help them solve their business pains. And so a lot of this turns into sort of content marketing strategies and, how are you taking them along the journey for the things that they are trying to solve in their business today, the things that they are struggling with their day to day. And in some cases, they may not know what the issue is. Obviously, the issue of the day is really how do I leverage AI for productivity in my current day-to-day workflow when I'm just trying to understand what the tools are, how to embed them, how do I organize my teams, what should I rely on it for, what should I not rely on it for, where am I thinking about data privacy issues, or does it sound like an AI, does it sound like human-generated content, those types of things. And so one of the areas that, I was, just kind of looking back to the social media revolution of about, gosh, just over a decade ago, it's a lot of this you can actually really engage with best practices or thought leadership to help people understand what's happening in terms of the transformation that's happening in the market, help them feel educated and informed, give them ways that are not intimidating for them to both upskill themselves and then think about how they might be able to leverage your solutions in the marketplace. And so that buyer enablement can come in the form of marketing best practices. Have you considered XYZ? Breaking it down into how your solutions are helping them do their day jobs. And so it can start at the very highest level, just state of the state, and then kind of take them down a journey. And in general, just be engaging and be helpful.
Got it. And okay, so that's easier said than done. I
Oh
want
yeah,
to make
100%. This is not like a small lift. I mean, entire functions and go-to-market motions have been built around this, and that goes back to who are the people that you're trying to engage with? What do they care about? What content do we have? How many resources do we have to be able to deploy things that those audiences need? Do they prefer written content or video content? What channels are they in? Where do they socialize with their peers? Where are they seeking information? Yeah, it's not easy.
so do you individually, as a CMO, as a head of marketing, ever follow principles? Like, is there a playbook that you stick to? Of course, this playbook has to evolve with time. Or do you like just go on a very subjective basis depending on what scenario you are in? Like, my question is, are there principles to marketing, let's say an AI data product or an AI marketing product that could help some builder who's in our audience today?
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate in the fact that I've worked for seed stage companies all the way up to, IBM, some of the largest enterprise organizations on the planet. And so, private organizations, venture-backed organizations. I work for PwC, which happens to be a partnership and SEC regulated. And then IBM, of course, is on the stock market. So you've got quarterly earnings and things. And so that gives me personally a very interesting lens and perspective with which to apply different go-to-market methodologies and kind of reach into my toolbox and figure out, okay, today I need a screwdriver, tomorrow I might need a hammer, and what do I need for the business problem that's in front of me? But if you look back to sort of foundational marketing principles, the 4 Ps, a lot of what we're doing with data segmentation, et cetera, has been done for direct mail well before the internet even existed. And so, you're looking at the demographic data of addresses and where, perhaps single people live or families live and all of those different attributes. We're just doing it on scale with the internet, with cookies, with looking at digital footprints from social media. And now with AI, I think we can get a lot more specific around, just because we've got more resources that we can apply across multiple segments at the same time, and perhaps be able to do more of them just by virtue of leveraging AI as a tool. But we have to do it with the right foundation in place. And this is what I think is going to be a really interesting inflection point over the next couple of years while we figure out how to put AI into our workflows, is we're going to have people that may have a lot of familiarity with leveraging AI tools. And then we're going to have other people who have years of intellectual knowledge and experience having done this over the course of their career. And how do we marry those two things up? Because AI is not going to be sufficient to do it on its own. You need some of those foundational principles with which to, and I'm going to go beyond prompting because I think that, we're going to get beyond prompting here relatively quickly. A lot of B2B marketing GPTs are coming up, and it's going to be a lot more bespoke, but you need some of those frameworks and understandings of how people behave, our consumers, our core audiences behave, with which to apply the strategy of AI. And so that's going to be really interesting. So you have to take some of those foundational marketing principles and then leverage AI for efficiency, and you'll be able to get further faster.
Yeah, Michelle, you've been sharing your learnings throughout with us, but I usually ask this on a closing note all the time. Is there something, like, when you look back on everything that has happened, like what would you say are the top 3 things? Because I know we could talk about AI and marketing and how it's going to evolve forever. And I personally maybe have like 20 follow-up questions, which might not be super appropriate for a podcast, which I'll shoot your way separately. But when you look back on your life, what would you say are the top 3 learnings? Because I see you are super active. You have a very inspirational profile of sorts. And it takes a lot of work. Like, you have to consistently, it shows up. Like, for everyone in the audience, the last time when we tried recording it, I was okay doing a show where there was like some bit of background noise. And that was partly because I was also feeling guilty of how long we had dragged the recording. And then from there, we are 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks now later that we are actually recording it. But I'm good because the quality is going to be better. And because I'm moving, still the light setup is like weird. I have like these ceiling lights. They have these shadows on my face and whatnot. But it is what it is. Still, like, there's this attention to detail that I see in your profile everywhere. There's like this continuous effort that you have put in. And I know that you're reaping the benefits of all of that now. So when you look back on everything you have been able to achieve as a marketer, or in general as a human being, doesn't have to be related to profession, what would you say are the 3 biggest learnings that everyone in my audience could benefit from?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, as a founder audience, so some of these answers are going to be intrinsic to your audience as well. Natural curiosity. Like I am just fascinated by things. You know, I started with in the marketing analytics space, and I just got curious. Right? What does it mean? How do I look at the data? What is it telling me? What if I is this behavior indicating this? Let me run a test. And so that was part of just me geeking out in the data and seeing what might work. And that's turned into really interesting methodologies that have grown on themselves over time and proved into some what I'll call today as industry norms and best practices. Um, what else? You know, I think it's well, that one's such a big one. Like I reverse engineered
I
code.
know.
I was like QAing Java for my digital experiences, and you know, a lot of that is pattern matching. I think it's always trying to continually learn and problem solve. And again, I think that these are some of the things that are intrinsic in the nature of your audience, and then looking for new opportunities. So one thing that it's just been fascinating, right? When I think I've got something to about as well as like, okay, I'm not going to be able to take this too much further. I'm on to the next problem to solve. And so that's just kind of a hunger and determination. And then constantly being in a state of learning. So, you know, kind of much like that natural curiosity, how do you stay abreast of all of the trends? How do you be somebody who's absorbing this and then ideating based on what those things might be? I suppose it's somewhat similar to the curiosity, but I think it's a different faction in terms of continuous learning. And then just being really, I guess, again, kind of naturally curious about people and networking and hearing people's different stories and connecting the dots. And I love matching people. Like, oh my gosh, I've got the two people you guys need to meet, and then just seeing that spark, and it always comes back, right? Just in terms of future introductions, but it's always delightful.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's super important. Like, so on the curiosity aspect, personally for me, I once in a while I have found myself like wondering as to why I am picking these largely unsolved domains and problems, because I'm curious and I get fascinated by something new. And then I go on and say, let's build something about it. And then the next day you're like, okay, there's no playbook. We don't know what is going to work. We are like scratching our heads all the way. And once in a while it might feel as to why we're doing this, but I think that partly is also because it drives me. Like I really feel happy doing it. And then being around good people often helps. Like if you are around someone who's curious, you would automatically end up looking at new things. And then once in a while when you're low or when you're just feeling like, okay, maybe I need to like take things slow, there's like this natural push that comes from your peers. So that has been super, super, super helpful. And on the relationship aspect, big time in the US, I think like what I'm learning is every marketing aside, it is those interpersonal relationships that you build when you're sharing like food and drinks with someone in a party where there's no talk of the work, which is actually what helps you grow professionally. And
It's true.
people have a very tough time cracking it, because you might be in a meeting and you're like, oh, so these three people there in a corner are talking to each other. What do I go in and say to them? And go say something, like go figure out what you are supposed to say, break the ice. But that's like where you're holding yourself back from actually succeeding. So
Yeah,
specifically in America, like,
I'll piggyback on that. So I'm actually, I guess, intrinsically shy. And so one thing after college, I made myself go to networking meetings and go up to people and shake their hands. Like I was like, just get over it. You're going to go up, you're going to shake people's hands, and you know, you're just going to do it. And I think that sort of breaking yourself out of your shell is really important, especially I think especially for founders, because they can get so immersed in their own product that they lose sight of even adjacent products that might be kind of being built up next to themselves, or the macro market in general, to understand where trends are, both in terms of what's happening with the clients or maybe in the VC community, because you know you've got cycles just in terms of what's hot and what's not, and you need to have a sense of where you focus your effort. And so those conversations, much like this ideal client profile thing that we're talking about, is actually the market conditions, and a lot of that, especially when you're in build mode, is based on the conversations that you have and where people are building and not. So yeah, 100%.
yeah, absolutely. And I think like as a founder, the personal struggle also is feeling bad or feeling guilty about the fact that, oh, I'm just meeting people, because there's no tangible output that you get out of meeting people. And I would rather, like, in my head, my brain would always convince myself to sit on a computer and like launch this new campaign, and maybe you're going to get like more people to buy your product, but that's probably not going to work. And what's going to work is me actually spending time in those meetings. So there are these phases where you have like spent 3 weeks just meeting people, going to a couple of conferences, and then you're feeling like, oh my God, I have not been able to do anything tangible in the last 3 weeks. What am I doing? Like there are these hotel bills piling up. Specifically as a small founder, it's a big challenge, but I think I'm learning to be more comfortable with it, and so should everyone who's listening in. But I'm glad that you
Yeah,
attest to that.
absolutely. And you shouldn't. you shouldn't feel guilty about that, because a couple of things. Those people that maybe you hadn't, there wasn't sort of an immediate follow-up, but two things. You might have an opportunity to collaborate with them several months down the line, or they might introduce you to somebody who might be the key to your next thing. You just never know where those introductions are going to go. But it's also, looking up and getting out of that initial mindset, it sparks different thought. I mean, this is why one of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm solving sort of really big problems, is like, design thinking workshops. Get in a room, get in a whiteboard. You need sounding boards. You need to play devil's advocate, and then articulate that into, project plans so you can actually go and build it. And you need alternative perspectives and data sources. And so you might hear something that's completely unrelated. It could be, I don't know, I'm going to say something like about, you overhear a conversation, somebody's talking about either young kids or preschool or something along those lines, but it'll spark an idea, or you'll connect a dot, and all of a sudden you're taking something down a completely different way.
Yeah. So someone phrased it beautifully for me. It was like, hey, luck is a big thing in life when it comes to entrepreneurship, but you don't just get lucky hoping that you'll get lucky. Like, you have to design for that luck. So surround yourself with the right people in the right situations. But anyway, Michelle, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. I wish we could do longer, and then hopefully we will probably a follow-up episode a couple of months down the line when we have more clarity on how marketing is evolving. But I'm so glad we were able to finally record it. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure hosting you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.